My name is Ben Lawson with Burk I.T. In this week's video, I want to take a moment and discuss the most recent release of the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report and discuss the implications of this report and how that information can be used for organizational cybersecurity and IT security strategy. Let's begin with a couple definitions. Let's talk about the difference between cybersecurity and information security or IT security. There's been some confusion over the years. These words, these phrases and names tend to be used interchangeably, but there is a distinction, and it's important that we consider that as we talk through information that we'll find in this type of report from Verizon. Information security or IT security really denotes security around an IT infrastructure and around a computer environment. We're talking about the physical security of data at rest as it's stored, computer rooms, network closets, the logical security around networks inside of a business, the security around PC, workstation, laptop configurations, server configurations, all the things that go into security for an IT environment for an organization. Cybersecurity, on the other hand, is really more focused on security related to the internet, security related to access that can come from the outside into your organization. In some cases, we may refer to that security as it pertains to a connection to another business or to a third party or through a partner. But really, we're talking about security for an organization against threats from the outside world, usually delivered via the internet. So that's a distinction that we want to talk about. Another important distinction to make and definition to think about is the difference between an incident, a security incident, and a breach. These two words often, or these two names often get tossed around and used interchangeably as well, but there is a distinction. An incident, a security incident, or an IT security incident, is really talking about an event in which a threat may or may not have been realized. Something has happened. A device may have been lost. An attack against your firewall, your network may have been perpetrated where there was denial of service or something got shut down or we lost power to something. There's been an incident, but we don't know exactly the full nature of that incident. We don't know if information has been lost, if data has been compromised or has left the organization. A breach, on the other hand, is exactly that. It is a situation when we know definitively that information or data has been lost. So an incident could be a situation where that happens. It's where you start. You always start with an incident and you determine through the course of the incident, have we actually been breached? Have we actually lost data? Has it been compromised and taken in some way? Has it been accidentally exposed to the world in some manner? Has it been posted to a website when it shouldn't have been? Has a cyber criminal obtained that data? Once you know that information for fact, for sure, then you have been breached. You're dealing with a breach situation. This is important as we work through this report because they will distinguish between factors that are involved in incidents and factors that are involved in breaches. So let's talk about the Verizon report. I have some of the relevant statistics here on my iPad, and we'll go through some of this in the course of this video. First, let me give you just a little bit of history about the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. This report has been around for the last 12 years. It originated in 2008. And Verizon and their cybersecurity and information security teams have come together and combined information from multiple sources around the world in both the public and private sector to build this report and give us a better picture of what happens across multiple industries, across multiple silos, and sort of build a threat picture of what we face in the world in terms of cybersecurity and IT security or information security. This year's report was built upon 41,686 security incidents. So events that took place that were security related. Of those, 2,013 were identified as actual breaches. Data was lost, compromised, or exposed in some way. The report is made up of 73 different distinct data sources, 66 of which were completely external to Verizon, so they've drawn from multiple third parties and independent organizations outside of Verizon. And those, as I mentioned, do span worldwide access, worldwide reporting in both the public and private sector from multiple countries. Some very important statistics that I want to start with that this report tells us, some things that it gives us some insight into that we don't normally think about. Normally when we think about security incidents and breaches, we think about what we see on the news. We think about very large organizations, the Equifax breach, the Target breach, the Anthem breach, very large national or multinational organizations that have been compromised in some way or accidentally or unintentionally exposed to data. What the report shows us is in all truth, most breaches and most incidents are isolated to small business. The report tells us this year that 43% of all the breaches that were discovered through this data compilation and massaging of data through the investigation, that 43% of breaches involved small business victims. So criminals are focusing on small business. They're not just going after large fish. 69% of all breaches and all incidents in general were perpetrated by outsiders. So this is not necessarily an internal threat that we're focused on. There still are internal threats, and we need to consider that, but the vast majority of incidents and breaches are associated with outside influences. Another thing that's kind of disturbing and something that we have to take into account is a significant increase in the number of incidents that can be associated with actors or criminals that are identified as state agents or nation-state players. So we've seen a significant growth in countries attacking other countries or countries monetizing criminal behavior through cyber activity and through cybercrime. That number this year was all the way up to 23% of all incidents involved actors who identified as a nation-state or a state player in some way. Another thing that won't surprise anyone, 71% of all of the breach activity that was identified in the report this year was financially motivated. So needless to say, criminals are conscious of the value of the data that they're attempting to steal. They're conscious of how they can make a living, how they can benefit from this data, and they are motivated by finance. This is no longer someone simply doing this for fun. It's no longer someone hacking or trying to compromise the system just to prove that they can or to do it for nefarious state reasons. The vast majority of all hacking, all cyber incidents are related to a financial motivation. Let's talk about top threat actions, top actions that are out there that are resulting in some type of security incident. Number one, denial of service attacks. People are simply using botnets, Internet of Things devices, herds of computers that have had malware placed on them. Through that infection, they're being controlled by another entity, and they're using those resources to shove a lot of bandwidth at different organizations and try and stop their internet feed, denying them service. That's what a denial of service attack is. On the flip side, aside from those incidents, when actual breaches take place, when actual information is stolen, the vast majority of those threat actions are related to phishing attacks. Phishing is still and will continue to grow to be our number one threat in terms of an intrusion point for most organizations. So we need to take that into account as we approach things like end user education. We approach things like filtering for our email, filtering for our edge devices, preventing that type of content to come in, because phishing is a major factor in data breach. Another component associated with that is the increase in stolen credentials. They're using phishing, cyber criminals are using phishing and other mechanisms to steal credentials and then use those credentials to compromise the network, to gain data, and then to monetize that data somehow on the black market, on the dark web. So let's take those into account. Hacking actions, actual ways in which penetration was made into an organization. This is not someone, as you would imagine, at a computer with strings of code and they're writing botnets and worms and everything they can to get past a firewall. The number one mechanism in nearly 70% of all hacking incidents throughout the course of this report, stolen credentials, social engineering. Let's go convince someone to give us the credentials we need so we don't have to do the hard work to break past the firewall, to get past the intrusion prevention devices. Let's simply steal some credentials, use those credentials as an entry point. So that's something that we need to take into account. Once again, as we educate our end users, as we educate them how important their passwords are, as we consider things like two-factor or multi-factor authentication for our networks and for our systems. These are the tools and the types of education that we can put out there in organizations to make the theft of credentials that much harder and prevent this type of access. Some other interesting information that came from the report this year, and it's worth sharing. C-level executives are 12 times more likely to be the target of a social incident. So in terms of incidents that relate to social media, finding targets, people are using Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram to target executives of organizations because they're going to have access to certain financial data. They're going to have, in many cases, elevated privileges. They're going to be susceptible to ransomware or to threatware. They're going to be susceptible to some type of leverage. And so they're being targeted through these social media incidents. These are the people that folks are going after with phishing campaigns, what we call spear phishing, to find people who are more elevated in privilege, more important in stature, and more easy to manipulate in terms of threat and ransomware. Of that 12-time attack, 9 times, these individuals are 9 times more likely to be the target of actual breaches. So once compromise is actually made, they then turn around in that breach and go after C-level data or C-level users to expand the data set. Another thing that I find interesting, I have a particular background in retail, and we've known for years that the chip and PIN phenomenon for debit and credit cards was coming. We now see that as a mainstream concept with most of our credit and debit cards in the United States. Well, that has driven down significantly the amount of fraud and theft associated with physical terminal compromise. So card numbers are not being stolen through physical terminal hacks, skimmers, other mechanisms to steal the card when it's swiped. So the chip and PIN has really reduced that threat vector, that threat landscape, that footprint. But on the flip side of that, focus is now shifted to web applications. So the easier way now to get card numbers and to compromise those debit cards and credit cards is through web applications and web application processing and portals where we enter our credit card information. So if you are a retailer, if you're a medical office, if you're someone who takes a credit card for a copay or a small transaction and you're processing that through a computer instead of swiping it through a physical terminal, then you need to take into account the security of that physical computer. Have you secured that device? Have you secured the network connection from that device to the internet, to the processor where you're processing that credit card through that payment terminal? That has become a significant growing field for cybercrime in terms of credit card number and debit card number theft. So take that into account. Mentioned the word ransomware a few times. Ransomware is not going away. In fact, it continues to get stronger. Ransomware has grown significantly. It was up to 24% of all malware that was used in some type of cybercrime, according to the Verizon report. So the threat is not going away. What do? We need to prepare for these things. We need to harden our defenses. We need to consider things like DNS-based content filtering outside of our firewall. So let's make sure that we're not going to websites, DNS entries that are controlled by command and control servers or other ransomware-related bots. Are we filtering that traffic? Are we educating our users on what to click on and what not to click on? What websites to visit and what websites not to visit? And do we have sound, flexible, quick responding backup solutions? Can we restore our data if it's compromised? If we're hit by ransomware, how long will it take us to recover? We hear the term RTO, recovery time objective, thrown around in this space. But we really need to know, how long can I be down? How quickly can I recover my system if I have to build it from scratch? So these things are very, very important in terms of ransomware attacks, and we need to take these under consideration. Finally, something that has been beneficial, something that has proven to work very well is end-user education around phishing attacks. We have seen over the last 7 years, according to the Verizon report, a significant reduction in individuals that will actually click in phishing simulations. So lots of organizations now test their end users. They'll do phishing tests where they'll send out fake emails and see how many users will respond. That number has been driven very low. Over the last 7 years, that number has fallen from 24% to only 3% of folks targeted in a phishing simulation who will actually click through. So that's a win. That means that our end user education is working, it's growing, we're doing a good job educating our users and making the threats present of mind as they're seeing these emails come in. Unfortunately, another trend that we're seeing is of those folks that do click through, the number of folks that click through using a mobile device has grown significantly. So we're becoming a little too trusting of our mobile devices in terms of our tablets and our smartphones, our iPhones, our Android devices. That number is up to 18% of all phishing click-throughs are now on a mobile device. What does this mean for us? It means we now have to start taking mobile device security a little more seriously. We need to think about things like mobile device management. How are we encrypting those devices? How are we securing those devices? How are we checking those devices for compromise? Are we ensuring that our users are updating their devices in a timely manner? They have the latest version of the operating system. They have the latest version of the different applications on those devices present. They're going to the right stores. They're not going to third-party Google Play stores or Android stores or compromised iOS-related stores. They're not jailbreaking those devices, because the threat is very real, and those are the devices that we're interacting with the internet on, and we have to make sure that they're secure. So that's a lot of information to throw at you. The good thing is this is a video, so you can rewind, you can play it back through again and think about some of these statistics. But the reason I want to share this with you is this is excellent data for us to consider. What are the trends that we face? Where are the attacks coming from? Where are they going? What are they targeting? Where are we the weakest? Where are we the strongest? Once we know this information, we can build a cybersecurity and IT security program that will defend our organizations and keep them safer from these types of attack. Remember, no one is 100% safe. Nothing is 100% foolproof. IT security is a layered approach. It's not a matter of if we're going to be compromised. It's a matter of when something's going to get lost. Are we prepared? Have we mitigated the risk? Have we made that footprint as small as possible? Are we prepared to respond? So please take this information, apply it to your organization, see where you're strong, see where you're weak, and make good decisions to fix those problems moving forward. Again, this has been Ben Lawson from Burk I.T. I look forward to talking to you soon.